They said millionaire husband Ethan Caldwell lived in a world of unimaginable privilege. His name was carved into towering skyscrapers, whispered in high-stakes business deals, and synonymous with wealth and power. To the outside world, he had everything: money, status, and a beautiful, pregnant wife, Olivia Caldwell. Their love story appeared flawless, the perfect union of wealth and elegance. But behind the doors of their penthouse, the cracks had already begun to show. Whispers followed Olivia everywhere. Suspicious murmurs that the child she carried wasn't Ethan's. At first, they were nothing more than idle gossip, but as rumors grew, so did Ethan's paranoia. He convinced himself that his wife had betrayed him, and in a desperate attempt to protect his reputation, he took her to court, accusing her of infidelity. But Olivia didn't come empty-handed. She had something far more damning than words: a hidden video that would expose Ethan's darkest secret right in front of the judge. Ethan Caldwell was the kind of man who commanded a room without uttering a word. With sharp features and an aura of effortless confidence, he embodied the ruthless ambition that had built his empire. Unlike his ancestors who had inherited wealth, Ethan had built his fortune through strategic investments: real estate, technology, and media. His calculated decisions turned his family's wealth into a billion-dollar dynasty. Olivia, on the other hand, came from an entirely different world. Raised in the foster care system, she had learned from a young age that survival meant relying on herself. But she was more than just a survivor. She was brilliant. Her hard work earned her a full scholarship to Columbia University, partly funded by the Caldwell Family Foundation. It was there, at a charity gala, that she first met Ethan. For Olivia, their initial connection felt like something out of a fairy tale. She was captivated by his confidence, drawn to the intensity in his eyes. For Ethan, however, the attraction wasn't just about chemistry. There was strategy in his choice. His father had once advised him, "Find someone outside our world, someone untouched by wealth, so you'll know she loves you for who you are." Their wedding was the epitome of high society extravagance. Held in a historic New York cathedral, the ceremony was a grand display of wealth and tradition. Olivia wore a custom-designed gown, hand-embroidered over 6 months, while Ethan stood beside her in a tailored suit that exuded power. The reception at the Caldwell estate was a who's who of politics, Hollywood, and business, an event meticulously designed to reinforce their image as the perfect couple. And for a while, Olivia believed it. She thought she had found not just a millionaire husband, but a partner, someone who saw her as an equal. She stood by his side, smiling for the cameras, attending elite gatherings, and playing the role of the devoted wife. But what she didn't see, what no one saw, was the storm brewing beneath the surface. Because Ethan Caldwell had his own secrets. And soon, the world would see the truth. For a while, Olivia truly believed she had found not just a wealthy husband, but a soulmate, someone who saw her as an equal. Ethan introduced her to the board members of Caldwell Enterprises, granting her a position in philanthropic committees and encouraging her passion for children's education charities. Olivia, in turn, breathed new life into the Caldwell brand, bringing a warmth and authenticity that the public adored. Society columns buzzed with admiration, celebrating how the powerful businessman had married for love, not just for financial alliances. But behind the glitz and glamour, cracks in Ethan's polished image had already begun to form. He had grown up watching his parents' marriage slowly unravel behind closed doors, and he had learned early that maintaining the Caldwell legacy was more important than personal happiness. Suspicion ran deep in his veins, embedded in him like second nature. While the world saw a devoted, generous husband, underneath it all, Ethan was controlling, meticulously orchestrating every aspect of their lives, including Olivia's. When Olivia discovered she was pregnant, the news sent ripples of excitement through New York's elite. A grand baby shower was planned, an opulent affair with a 4-tier cake, embossed invitations, and extravagant floral arrangements shaped like swans. In public, Ethan played the part of the proud and doting husband. His hand rested protectively over Olivia's small baby bump, his smile unwavering as he charmed their guests. Olivia's heart swelled with naive hope, believing that this child would bring them closer, solidifying their love. Yet behind the scenes, something had shifted. Ethan became increasingly distant, His late-night work meetings grew more frequent. Phone calls ended abruptly when she walked into the room. His moods turned unpredictable. One moment affectionate, the next cold and detached. Was it pre-fatherhood stress? Or was there something more sinister lurking beneath the surface? His protectiveness soon turned into paranoia. He demanded updates on her whereabouts, despite the fact that Olivia rarely left their penthouse. When her college friend Rachel Thompson visited for lunch, Ethan's demeanor darkened at the mere mention of Olivia's old male classmates. He masked his insecurity with forced humor, joking that she might run off with a professor. Olivia had laughed it off at the time, never imagining that his words would soon become a weapon used against her. In the quiet of their penthouse, Olivia felt more alone than ever. Ethan was only affectionate when the cameras were rolling or when they attended high society events. She told herself it was the pressure of his business empire weighing on him. He was a mogul after all. She couldn't possibly know that his jealousy was morphing into something far more dangerous, an obsession that would soon spiral out of control. Meanwhile, their friends in the tabloids remained enchanted by the fairy tale romance of the Caldwells. But fairy tales don't always have happy endings. At times, Olivia felt like an outsider in a world of gilded ballrooms and designer gowns. The luxury surrounding her was dazzling, but beneath the surface, cracks were forming. She convinced herself that the child growing inside her would bring her and Ethan closer, that it would solidify their family. She had no idea that Ethan was already setting plans in motion. Plans that would shatter not just her place in the Caldwell dynasty, but her very sense of identity. One evening, Ethan arrived home late from a business dinner. Olivia, dressed in a soft blue maternity gown, was curled up on the couch, reading a parenting book. At the sound of his footsteps, she brightened, eager for his company. But Ethan barely met her eyes. "How was dinner?" she asked gently. He shrugged, pouring himself a glass of scotch from the bar cart. "Fine," he muttered. Something in his voice made Olivia hesitate. She wanted to ask more, but he was already walking away, disappearing into his home office under the guise of urgent work. She sighed and went to bed alone, assuming he was just overwhelmed with business. If only she had known, Ethan wasn't reviewing reports. He was poring over her phone records, which he had secretly obtained. Every unknown number, every innocent message was scrutinized under the lens of his growing paranoia. His jealousy had deep roots. His father, Charles Caldwell, had been infamous for his string of affairs, tearing their family apart. Ethan had witnessed firsthand how betrayal destroyed his mother, how it turned love into nothing but a painful memory. From a young age, he learned a dangerous lesson: never trust your spouse completely. Ironically, despite his efforts to avoid becoming his father, he was walking the same path. The breaking point came when he found a message from a man named Daniel Carter, an old friend from Olivia's childhood in foster care. "Just wanted to say hi and congrats. Heard about the baby news. Wishing you the best." A simple, harmless message. But in Ethan's mind, it was proof of something sinister. He became obsessed with the idea that Olivia was hiding something, that she was rekindling a romance behind his back. His attempts to address it were subtle at first, offhanded jokes about paternity tests, casual remarks about past lovers. Olivia laughed them off, unaware of the storm brewing inside him. But her best friend, Rachel Thompson, noticed the shift. Over coffee one morning, Olivia confessed, "He's been acting so suspicious lately. It's like he's waiting for me to slip up." Rachel frowned. "You need to set boundaries, Liv. If you don't, this will only get worse." Olivia wanted to believe that love would conquer Ethan's doubts. She told herself that once the baby was born, he would see her loyalty and his paranoia would fade. She never imagined that his insecurities would soon spiral into something far more destructive. "I've never given him a reason not to trust me," Olivia murmured, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "It's like he's searching for something to be angry about." Rachel's brows knitted together in concern. "Liv, you need to set boundaries. If you let Ethan keep questioning your loyalty without proof, it's only going to escalate." But Olivia still clung to hope. She believed that once the baby arrived, Ethan would finally see her devotion and his suspicions would disappear. She had no idea his paranoia had already taken root, fueled by ghosts from his past, transforming him into an obsessive investigator of her every move. At the same time, Ethan's so-called business meetings had begun to shift. His late-night dinners were now interspersed with clandestine meetings in upscale Manhattan lounges. And they weren't just about work. Victoria Hayes, a strikingly ambitious executive at Caldwell Media, had become his confidant. On paper, their meetings were about restructuring a TV channel. But in reality, Victoria provided something far more intoxicating: validation. She listened to Ethan's frustrations with quiet sympathy, subtly fanning the flames of his paranoia. She saw an opportunity. If she played her cards right, she could become more than just a business associate. Ethan fixated on Olivia's every interaction, dissecting her phone calls and text messages, convinced she was hiding something. Meanwhile, Olivia remained blissfully unaware, assuming his erratic behavior stemmed from the stress of impending fatherhood. And in the background, Victoria waited, biding her time. One weekend, Olivia hosted a charity event at the Caldwell estate, raising funds to provide scholarships for foster children, a cause deeply personal to her. The sprawling lawn buzzed with elegantly dressed guests, the soft notes of a jazz quartet drifting through the evening air. Photographers from high-profile lifestyle magazines documented every detail, capturing Olivia in her element. Ethan arrived late. His expression was tight, his demeanor distant. Olivia, glowing in a flowing champagne-colored gown, greeted him warmly. "I'm so glad you're here. The event is going wonderfully. And the baby?" She gently placed a hand on her growing belly. "She's been kicking all day." Ethan barely reacted. His eyes swept across the crowd, his jaw tightening. "Who else is here?" His voice was clipped. "Plenty of donors, a few old friends," Olivia said, oblivious to the edge in his tone. "Even Daniel Carter stopped by to show support. Remember, my friend from foster care?" Ethan's entire posture stiffened. His gaze darkened. "Yes," he said flatly. "You've mentioned him before." Olivia didn't notice the warning in his voice as she led him toward a group of guests, but something inside her prickled with unease. Ethan was watching her closely, too closely. Ethan's handshake with Daniel was ice cold. Daniel, ever the gentleman, tried to engage him in small talk, praising Olivia's dedication to charity. But Ethan's forced smile barely masked the storm brewing behind his eyes. A few feet away, Olivia laughed lightly while speaking with a group of guests, unaware that Ethan had excused himself almost immediately, leaving Daniel standing there, confused. Later that evening, Olivia found Ethan alone in the estate's rose garden. The scent of blooming flowers mixed with the distant hum of conversation from the party. Still glowing from the success of the event, she approached him, eager to share the moment. But one look at his face made her pause. His expression was thunderous. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice soft with concern. Ethan sneered. "I saw you with your old friend Daniel," laughing, touching his arm like you couldn't get enough of him. Olivia blinked, stunned. "Ethan, I was hosting. I greet everyone that way." He cut her off, his voice low and sharp. "Don't lie. I've seen your texts. You two go way back. Maybe you never really let go of him. Maybe that's why this pregnancy happened so conveniently." Her breath caught. Her pulse pounded in her ears. "Are you suggesting this baby isn't yours?" she whispered, her voice raw with disbelief. Ethan shrugged with a calculated calmness that made her stomach turn. "That's exactly what I'm suggesting." Anger flared, burning through the hurt. "How dare you?" Olivia's voice shook. "I have been nothing but faithful, nothing but devoted to you." Ethan scoffed, stepping closer, his blue eyes blazing with something irrational and dark. "So you say," he murmured. "But I know how old flames rekindle, Olivia. I've seen it firsthand." Tears welled in her eyes. "I am not your father's mistress, Ethan. I am your wife. And this baby is ours. How could you even think otherwise?" Guests passed by in the distance, their chatter fading as they noticed the tension crackling between the couple. Quickly, they averted their gazes, pretending not to witness the intimate war unfolding before them. Olivia's breath was ragged, her body trembling from the sheer force of her emotions. Ethan's expression remained cold, his distrust a visible weight in the air. Then, with quiet cruelty, he muttered, "If you have nothing to hide, you won't mind a paternity test." And with that, he turned and walked away. She stood frozen, humiliation rooting her to the spot. A part of her wanted to chase after him, demand an immediate apology, but what was the point? For the rest of the evening, Olivia forced a smile, playing the role of the perfect hostess. Inside, she was crumbling. That night, she locked herself in their bedroom and wept into her pillow. Her millionaire husband, the man she had once trusted with her whole heart, had just accused her of the ultimate betrayal. And she still had no idea that his obsession had only just begun. The argument in the rose garden was only the beginning. Ethan's doubts didn't fade. Instead, they consumed him, twisting into something darker. In the days following the charity event, he withdrew even further from Olivia. Rather than seeking comfort in his marriage, he found solace elsewhere. Victoria Hayes had always been more than just an executive at Caldwell Media. To the world, she was a brilliant strategist, helping the company expand into new markets. But behind the scenes, she had become Ethan's confidant. Rumors of their closeness swirled among employees, though no one dared to challenge the CEO's personal affairs. Victoria's past was a rags-to-riches tale as dramatic as Olivia's. Raised in a small town, she clawed her way up the corporate ladder with ruthless ambition. She was intelligent, perceptive, and, above all, opportunistic. She knew how to read people, how to say exactly what they needed to hear. And right now, Ethan needed reassurance. One evening, he invited Victoria to a private dinner at an exclusive rooftop restaurant. The city's skyline glittered beyond the glass railing, candlelight reflecting off polished silverware. A breeze rustled Victoria's silk shawl as she leaned forward, her voice laced with faux concern. "You seem so tense, Ethan," she murmured. "You know you can talk to me about anything." He exhaled heavily, swirling the wine in his glass. Everything was fine until Olivia started acting differently. "She's reconnecting with old friends, laughing too easily with people I don't know. That Daniel guy, I can't shake the feeling something's going on." Victoria arched a perfectly shaped brow. "Have you ever considered that Olivia might not be the person you thought she was? After all, you've only known her for a few years. Sometimes, people hide secrets." Ethan's grip tightened around the stem of his glass. His mind replayed every moment, her easy smiles, the way she touched Daniel's arm, the text messages. "I just can't stand the thought that I might be raising another man's child," he admitted, his voice raw. "It haunts me." Victoria placed her hand over his. The touch was deliberate, calculated. He flinched, but he didn't pull away. "If you really suspect something, you need to know the truth," she said gently. "You can't let a potential betrayal destroy your life. You deserve to be happy, Ethan." Something flickered in his gaze, a dangerous mix of vulnerability and desperation. Victoria saw her moment and pressed forward. "I've known men in your position. If you need evidence, proof, I can connect you with the right people." Ethan hesitated. Guilt gnawed at him. Olivia was, after all, his wife. She was carrying his child, but doubt and heartbreak were stronger than reason. And in that moment, Ethan Caldwell made a choice he could never take back. Ethan hesitated. "What do you suggest?" Victoria's smile was smooth, reassuring. "I can put you in touch with an investigative firm. If Olivia is innocent, you'll have peace of mind." She let the sentence dangle. The implication was clear. If she wasn't, Ethan would have the proof he needed to ruin her reputation. That night, Ethan returned to the penthouse. Olivia was already asleep, curled up beneath the soft glow of the bedside lamp. Her growing belly was a silent testament to the future they had once dreamed of together. He stood in the doorway, watching her, his mind at war with itself. Was he really prepared to spy on his wife? To turn their marriage into a battlefield of doubt and accusations? In the end, he convinced himself he had no choice. He needed the truth. What he failed to see was that Victoria's interests extended far beyond helping him. She wasn't just feeding his insecurities. She was positioning herself to take Olivia's place, in his life, in his bed, and in the Caldwell empire itself. The rift between Ethan and Olivia widened with each passing day. He came home late, offering curt explanations about emergency meetings or investor trips. Weekends were spent in other cities, supposedly overseeing expansions. Olivia felt the shift. Conversations grew tense. His once affectionate gestures were replaced with cold scrutiny. He made snide remarks about her spending, about how her friends seemed too dependent on her. The baby, instead of bringing them together, had become a silent reminder of the wedge growing between them. At her latest checkup, Dr. Catherine Lund noticed the strain on Olivia's face. "You need to be careful," she cautioned gently. "Elevated stress isn't good for you or the baby." Is everything all right at home? Olivia forced a smile, hiding the tremor in her hands. Just the usual pressures of, well, being married to a Caldwell. She couldn't bring herself to admit that Ethan had accused her of infidelity, that he no longer looked at her the same way. In a moment of weakness, she reached out to someone who had always been there for her, Daniel Carter. They met for lunch at a quiet cafe, far from the Caldwell Empire's sphere of influence. Daniel listened, concern deepening in his expression as Olivia described Ethan's growing hostility. Why would he think that? Daniel asked, stunned. We've never been anything more than friends. We barely even talk outside of the occasional check-in. Olivia's eyes stung with tears. He's convinced I'm hiding something. It's like he wants proof of a betrayal that doesn't exist. She hesitated, her voice breaking. I don't know, Daniel. Maybe he's trying to justify leaving me. Or maybe he wants to destroy my reputation and keep the baby for himself. Daniel reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Liv, you're not alone. What neither of them knew was that Ethan had already set his plan in motion. And this meeting? It would be twisted into exactly the kind of proof he had been waiting for. You're not alone, Liv, Daniel said firmly. I'll help however I can, even if that means testifying. Ethan is the one who's wrong here, not you. Neither of them noticed the man sitting in a shadowed corner of the cafe, casually sipping his coffee. The private investigator, hired by Ethan, snapped a series of well-timed photographs, each frame carefully chosen to paint a damning picture. Olivia's tear-streaked face, Daniel's hand covering hers in comfort. Out of context, it looked intimate. Within hours, Ethan had the images in his inbox, delivered straight from Victoria's connections. His worst fears, now seemingly confirmed, burned into his mind. Olivia and Daniel. Sitting together, hands touching, her face filled with emotion. To Ethan, the evidence was undeniable. He didn't need context. He didn't need explanations. That evening, when Olivia returned to the penthouse, Ethan was waiting. The living room was dark except for a single lamp, casting his silhouette against the glass windows. The moment she stepped inside, he switched on the overhead lights, revealing his furious expression. Without a word, he thrust a stack of photographs toward her, his hands trembling with rage. Explain this, he spat. Olivia's heart pounded as she stared at the pictures. Daniel, the cafe, her tears. This is ridiculous, she stammered. Ethan, Daniel is just a friend. I was upset. I needed someone to talk to. His scoff was thick with disdain. Spare me the lies. He tossed the photos onto the marble floor. I have investigators, Olivia. You can't hide anything from me. Tears welled in her eyes. Then have them investigate you, she shot back, her voice rising. These photos mean nothing, and you know it. Ethan stepped closer, his voice dangerously low. They prove you've broken my trust. And if you're sneaking around like this, who's to say that baby is even mine? A sharp breath left Olivia's lips. Instinctively, she placed a protective hand over her stomach. How can you do this to us? She whispered. To your own family? You're scaring me, Ethan. His face was unreadable. Then in a chillingly calm tone he said, You brought this on yourself. I won't be a fool, Olivia. If this child isn't mine, I'll make sure the world knows exactly who you are. Her stomach twisted. The man she had once trusted, the millionaire husband she had built a life with, was now treating her like an enemy. She turned and fled to the bedroom, sobbing into her hands. Never had she felt so alone, so trapped. But she had no idea how much worse it was about to get. Within a week, a uniformed process server arrived at the penthouse, handing her an official summons. Olivia stared at the legal documents in horror. Ethan was taking his accusations public. He was dragging her into court. The lawsuit hit Olivia like a tidal wave. Ethan wasn't just accusing her in private. He had taken his suspicions to court, filing claims of emotional cruelty and fraud over the child's paternity. He was demanding an immediate hearing, claiming he needed to protect his property and inheritance rights. The media pounced on the scandal. Headlines blared accusations of betrayal. Tabloids ran bold captions, "Golden wife" or "Golden lie." Outside the penthouse, a sea of photographers and reporters swarmed, desperate for a statement. Olivia kept the curtains drawn, her phone buzzing non-stop with calls from journalists. At first, she was paralyzed with horror. The man she had once trusted, the millionaire husband who had promised her forever, was now tearing her reputation apart in the most public way possible. She spent days in tears, ignoring messages from everyone except Rachel and Daniel. Meanwhile, Ethan fueled the fire, making cryptic statements to the press about seeking the truth and protecting the Caldwell legacy. One afternoon, Rachel arrived at the penthouse, not alone. Beside her was Sarah Duvall, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney specializing in family law. Olivia led them to the living room, once a space filled with warmth, now suffocating under the weight of Ethan's absence. "We need a plan," Sarah said bluntly after Olivia finished recounting the nightmare unfolding around her. "Ethan's allegations are serious, but his so-called evidence is weak. We can fight this." Olivia swallowed hard. "He has pictures of me with Daniel, completely innocent, but they look bad." Her voice trembled. "What if that's enough? I have no proof to defend myself. I never cheated." Rachel squeezed her knee. "You don't have to prove a negative, but we can expose his hypocrisy." A flicker of realization sparked in Olivia's mind. She had always brushed off rumors about Ethan's past indiscretions, whispers of affairs silenced by NDAs and hush money. She had never seen anything concrete. Until now, Victoria, the late nights, the secret smiles, the business trips where she was always at his side. Heartbreak tightened in her chest. Could Ethan himself be guilty of the very thing he was accusing her of? Sarah leaned forward. "If he's cheating, we need evidence. Hard proof. Otherwise, his legal team will drown us in rumors." Olivia hesitated. "I don't have access to anything." Sarah's expression remained calm, calculating. "Then we find a way." For the first time in weeks, Olivia felt something other than fear. Determination. Ethan had gone to war against her. Now, she would fight back. Olivia hesitated. "He's been so careful. If something is there, I don't know how to find it." Rachel leaned in. "Don't forget his staff at Caldwell Media. Someone must have noticed how close Victoria is to him. Maybe a phone call, a travel itinerary, anything unguarded that could help." Sarah nodded. "We need any detail that proves Ethan's hypocrisy, financial records, witness accounts, suspicious credit card charges. At the same time, we'll highlight your strong character, your philanthropic work, and how absurd his claims are, considering you rarely even leave the penthouse unless for medical checkups." Olivia swallowed the lump in her throat. Every part of her wanted to believe that Ethan's love for her had been real, that the man she married wouldn't go this far to destroy her. But she couldn't afford to be naive anymore. She had to fight. Sarah wasted no time assembling a team of private investigators and digital forensics experts. The quiet operation was funded by Morgan Lawson, Olivia's father figure from her years in foster care. He wasn't a wealthy man, but he had set aside savings for her wedding. Money Olivia never used. Now, he insisted it be used to uncover the truth. The investigators focused on Ethan's frequent business trips. He often traveled to cities where Caldwell Media had affiliate stations, particularly Los Angeles and Chicago. And in almost every case, Victoria was by his side. Official records listed her as an assistant or consultant. But that wasn't the whole story. Digging deeper, Olivia's investigators uncovered a pattern. Victoria's presence on these trips wasn't just professional. Hotel records, car services, and private jet logs all pointed to an unusually close relationship. Still, none of it was definitive proof of an affair until they found the emails. A leaked chain of messages from Ethan's official company account led to an anonymous email. Tracing it back, they discovered it belonged to Victoria. At first, the messages were strictly business. But over time, the tone shifted. "I can't wait for our next trip. You looked stunning at dinner." Olivia's hands shook as she read the words. After everything, after he humiliated her, after he called her unfaithful, it was him all along. For weeks, Ethan had painted her as a liar, a woman who had disgraced their marriage. And now, with the weight of his own words staring back at her, Olivia felt something she hadn't in a long time. Power. Ethan wanted to destroy her? Fine, she would make sure he fell with her. Some of the emails hinted at intimate encounters, mentions of sweet 1-2-3 and private moments shared behind closed doors. Sarah's eyes lit up as she read them. It wasn't a direct confession of an affair, but it was enough to raise serious questions. Olivia sat frozen, heartbreak and fury warring inside her. "It's him," she whispered, her voice shaking. Tears welled in her eyes. "He's the one who cheated. How could he do this to me?" Sarah squeezed her shoulder. "We're on the right track. If we can match these messages to a specific date and location, we might be able to find surveillance footage, hotel records, anything that puts them in the same room. The investigators worked relentlessly. They tracked Ethan and Victoria's stay at a luxury hotel in Los Angeles 3 months prior. A former employee, sympathetic to Olivia's situation, agreed to share archived security footage. And there it was. Ethan and Victoria stepping off an elevator late at night, walking toward the penthouse suite. The timestamp matched one of Ethan's flirtatious emails perfectly. But the real blow came next. A snippet of CCTV footage capturing Ethan leaning in, pressing a lingering kiss to Victoria's lips in the dimly lit hallway. Olivia felt physically sick. The nights she had spent alone, wondering why Ethan had become so distant, why his affection had turned cold. This was why. The betrayal crashed over her like a tidal wave. But instead of breaking her, it hardened her resolve. She wouldn't let Ethan's lies destroy her. Sarah grinned. "This is gold. He wanted to paint you as the cheater? We're about to tear his entire case apart." They prepared carefully. Sarah advised Olivia to keep the evidence hidden until the right moment in court. Ethan's legal team was still riding high, confident they could force her into submission. Their entire case hinged on carefully framed photographs with Daniel, phone logs that suggested frequent contact, and the assumption that Olivia would crack under pressure. But Olivia wasn't going to crack. Her millionaire husband had underestimated her. She wasn't just fighting for her reputation, she was fighting for her unborn child. She refused to let Ethan twist reality, to let him control their child's future under the weight of a fabricated scandal. When the morning of the preliminary hearing arrived, the courthouse was surrounded by flashing cameras and shouting reporters. Olivia stepped out of the car, her back straight, her hands gripping the evidence like a shield. She was no longer a frightened woman backed into a corner. She was a mother ready to defend herself. And Ethan was about to watch everything he built come crumbling down. Cameras flashed as reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, shouting questions. Olivia, dressed in a simple black maternity dress, kept her gaze down, ignoring the chaos around her. Sarah Duvall walked beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Ethan, however, entered through a private side entrance, flanked by his high-profile legal team. His expression was unreadable as he marched toward the courtroom, his confidence unshaken. Inside, the tension was suffocating. For the first time in weeks, Olivia faced Ethan. He sat across from her, his eyes cold and filled with resentment. She barely recognized the man who had once sworn to love her. The judge, seated behind a polished mahogany bench, called the hearing to order. Ethan's attorneys moved first. Their strategy was ruthless, painting Olivia as an opportunist who had schemed her way into the Caldwell fortune. They insisted there was reasonable doubt about the unborn child's paternity, citing suspicious messages exchanged with Daniel Carter. They displayed the photographs. Olivia in a cafe, Daniel's hand over hers, her tear-streaked face caught in the moment. "Your Honor," Ethan's lead attorney said gravely, "we seek a court order for immediate paternity testing, as well as protective measures to safeguard the Caldwell estate from fraudulent inheritance claims." Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Olivia's grip tightened on the arms of her chair. She looked at Ethan, searching for any trace of guilt, of hesitation. But his expression remained stone cold. Then Sarah stood. Her presence was steady, commanding. "Your Honor, my client, Olivia Caldwell, unequivocally denies these baseless allegations. She welcomes a paternity test once her child is born. However, we have compelling evidence that Mr. Caldwell is acting in bad faith, seeking to destroy his wife's reputation while concealing his own misconduct." A hush fell over the room. Sarah methodically dismantled Ethan's accusations. She presented text messages, proving Olivia and Daniel's conversations had been about charitable projects, not romance. "Even if my client sought emotional support from an old friend," Sarah said smoothly, "that does not equate to an affair." The tension in the courtroom escalated as Sarah's voice took on an edge. "But what Mr. Caldwell has failed to mention," she continued, stepping toward the judge, "is his own questionable behavior." She gestured to a large screen at the front of the courtroom. "We would like to introduce Exhibit D, security footage from a Los Angeles hotel, dated 3 months ago." Ethan's attorneys immediately objected, their voices sharp. "Irrelevant. invasion of privacy. The judge held up a hand. "I'll decide that." Sarah nodded to the technician, who pressed play. And there it was, clear as day. Ethan, stepping off an elevator in the early hours of the morning, his arm wrapped around Victoria Hayes. A moment later, he leaned in, his lips brushing against hers in the dim hallway light. A collective gasp echoed in the courtroom. For the first time, Ethan's mask cracked. And Olivia knew, at that moment, she had turned the tide. Ethan's attorneys objected, claiming invasion of privacy, arguing irrelevance. But the judge, intrigued, allowed Sarah to proceed. A hush fell over the courtroom as the lights dimmed and the video began to play. The footage was grainy, but the figures were unmistakable. Ethan Caldwell and Victoria Hayes stepped off a hotel elevator. He leaned in, his hand brushing against her waist. A second later, their lips met in a lingering kiss before disappearing into the penthouse suite. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Olivia closed her eyes, exhaling shakily as Sarah seized the moment. The man who accuses his wife of infidelity is the very one engaged in an affair. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Ethan's jaw tensed, his entire body stiffening as eyes turned on him. His legal team scrambled, throwing out desperate arguments that the footage was taken out of context, that it could be doctored. But Sarah had come prepared. She presented hotel records that matched the date and time of the footage. Ethan had booked the penthouse suite for the same night in question. The evidence was airtight. The judge's gaze hardened. "Mr. Caldwell, you filed claims against your wife while withholding relevant details about your own conduct. This raises serious concerns about your credibility." Ethan clenched his fists, struggling to maintain composure under the weight of the judge's scrutiny. Across the courtroom, Olivia sat motionless, silent, tears slipping down her cheeks. She had feared this moment. She had dreaded it. But now, watching Ethan's deception unravel in the most public way possible, she felt something else. Relief. Their marriage was beyond repair, but at least her name would not be tarnished by his lies. When the hearing concluded, the judge dismissed Ethan's claims pending further review. He issued a stern warning. Any further attempts to harass Olivia would not be tolerated by the court. Exhausted but victorious, Olivia walked out of the courtroom with Sarah by her side, ignoring the swarm of reporters outside. A part of her still mourned the love she once believed in. But today, she had won a critical battle, exposing the truth for the world to see. The media latched onto the scandal, flipping the narrative overnight. The same tabloids that once questioned Olivia's loyalty now ran headlines. Caldwell court shocker. Cheating millionaire husband exposed. Paparazzi hounded Ethan, chasing him through the streets, bombarding him with questions about Victoria. His empire took a brutal hit. Stocks in Caldwell Enterprises dipped as investors worried about lawsuits. Board members grumbled behind closed doors, questioning his recklessness. The Caldwell brand thrived on an image of integrity, and Ethan had tarnished it. Unable to face the public, he retreated, hiding in private clubs, evading cameras, his once unshakable reputation crumbling before him. And Olivia? For the first time in months, she felt like she could finally breathe. Ethan withdrew from public life, isolating himself with a small circle of loyalists. The fallout from the trial had turned his name into a scandal, making him a pariah in the same elite circles he once dominated. Meanwhile, Olivia found herself at the center of an unexpected wave of support. Strangers flooded her social media with messages of encouragement. Organizations she had collaborated with reached out, inviting her to speak about resilience and empowerment. She barely knew how to process it. The woman once branded as a liar was now being celebrated for her strength. Rachel, ever the optimist, nudged her playfully. "You're the new face of the unstoppable mother, Liv. Own it." But Olivia still carried wounds that no amount of public sympathy could heal. Her due date was approaching, and she was facing it alone. She had once pictured Ethan at her side, holding her hand in the delivery room, sharing in the wonder of their child's first breath. That dream was gone. Instead, she distracted herself by preparing the nursery. Though she still lived in the penthouse, Ethan had moved to a separate wing. Their conversations were minimal, limited to logistics, doctor's appointments, paperwork. Whenever they did cross paths, shame clung to him like a shadow. He could barely look her in the eye. Victoria Hayes, now publicly exposed, attempted to salvage what remained of her career. She gave a carefully crafted interview, positioning herself as a misunderstood colleague who had fallen in love with Ethan under complicated circumstances. She insisted they had ended things once Olivia's pregnancy became more serious. Few believed her. The damage was already done. The video evidence had destroyed her credibility, and rumors swirled that Caldwell Media was quietly severing ties with her. Once, Victoria had dreamed of replacing Olivia. Now she was the one cast aside. One evening, Ethan hesitated in the doorway of the nursery. Olivia was arranging plush toys on a shelf, her back to him. His voice was subdued. "How are you feeling?" She didn't turn around. "Fine." He shifted uncomfortably. I want to apologize, again." She placed a teddy bear on the shelf, her shoulders stiff. "I was so convinced you were lying, I let my fears control me. I hurt you." Her fingers tightened over the edge of the crib. "You didn't just hurt me, Ethan," she said quietly. "You dragged me through public humiliation. You put this baby at risk with all the stress you caused." He swallowed hard. "I know. I wish I could undo it." Silence stretched between them. "I can't change the past," he finally admitted, "but maybe I can be there for you, for our child." Olivia turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "The only reason you're sorry is because you got caught," she said quietly. "If I hadn't found that video, you'd still be accusing me, still controlling me." Ethan flinched, guilt flashing across his face. "This child will need a father," he said, his voice hesitant. "Yes," Olivia agreed, "but I don't know if that means you." His features twisted with regret. "I understand," he murmured. "I'll respect whatever you decide." She said nothing, simply inclining her head before turning back to the toys on the nursery shelf. An uneasy silence filled the room. Ethan lingered for a moment, as if hoping for something more. When it didn't come, he quietly left. Olivia exhaled, a swirl of emotions tightening in her chest. She had recognized the flicker of sincerity in his voice, but it was far too late for apologies. With her due date fast approaching, she had no time for illusions. She had to think practically. Custody arrangements, financial security, and most importantly, her own emotional well-being. Ethan had shattered her trust, and no amount of regret could rebuild what he had destroyed. Despite the damning video evidence and the dismissal of Ethan's lawsuit, the legal battle wasn't over. His attorneys regrouped, determined to salvage control over the narrative. They argued that Ethan's parental rights needed protection and filed new motions seeking shared custody once the baby was born. On her lawyer's advice, Olivia filed her own petition to separate, formalize financial support, and ensure she could raise her child without fear of manipulation. The final battle would take place in the courtroom. The media swarmed outside as Olivia arrived, her now full-term pregnancy making the courthouse steps feel steeper than ever. Sarah Duvall walked beside her, steady and focused, while Rachel and Daniel followed close behind, ready to offer support. Ethan entered through a different door, his legal team notably smaller than before. He looked tired, weighed down by the public backlash and the fallout from the scandal. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Judge Carol Hastings, an experienced family court judge, wasted no time getting to the heart of the matter. She acknowledged that Ethan's accusations had been disproven, and that Olivia had presented undeniable evidence of his affair. But now, the judge explained, the focus was on custody, support, and the future. Ethan's attorney rose first, attempting to shift the narrative. "My client deeply regrets his past actions," the lawyer began, "but fatherhood should not be withheld due to a private mistake. Mr. Caldwell is eager to be a part of his child's life, and we believe shared custody is in the best interest of the child." Olivia's hands tightened in her lap. She wasn't about to let Ethan rewrite the story. Not when she had fought this hard to take back control. Olivia's jaw tightened at the euphemism. A private mistake. That was how Ethan justified the public humiliation, the lies, and the emotional toll he had inflicted on her. Sarah remained composed as she stated Olivia's position. "My client does not intend to deny Mr. Caldwell visitation, provided it occurs in a safe, stress-free environment for the child. However, we seek sole legal custody initially, given Mr. Caldwell's pattern of emotional manipulation and false allegations, which caused severe distress to Olivia and directly impacted her health during pregnancy." A murmur swept through the courtroom. Ethan's expression hardened. His gaze lingered on Olivia, searching for something, regret, weakness, but she refused to meet his eyes. The argument stretched for hours. Ethan's legal team insisted Olivia was overreacting, painting her as vengeful. But Sarah methodically laid out the psychological and reputational damage Ethan had caused. Judge Hastings finally called for a private discussion, hoping to broker a resolution outside of the courtroom battle. In a conference room, Olivia sat stiffly across from Ethan, their attorneys on either side. The air was thick with tension. A sharp kick reminded Olivia that time was running short. Soon, their child would be here. Judge Hastings turned to Ethan. "Mr. Caldwell, you subjected your wife to extraordinary stress, putting the well-being of your unborn child at risk. That weighs heavily in the question of sole custody." Ethan exhaled shakily, his fingers gripping the table. "I know I was wrong, Your Honor. I lost control. But I love my child. I need a chance to be a father." Olivia's voice was quiet but firm. "A father who lies, who humiliates me in public." She met Ethan's gaze for the first time in weeks. "Our baby deserves better." Ethan stared at the floor, his shoulders slumping. For the first time he seemed deflated. "I know," he whispered. "I'll accept whatever arrangement ensures the baby is cared for. I only ask for some visitation. I can't walk away entirely." The judge observed them both before speaking. "I'm proposing a compromise." Olivia braced herself. "You will retain primary custody, Mrs. Caldwell," the judge said, looking at her. "However, Mr. Caldwell will have structured visitation under strict guidelines ensuring a respectful co-parenting relationship. Any form of harassment will result in legal action." Ethan nodded, silent. "Additionally," the judge continued, "Mr. Caldwell will provide substantial child support and spousal support, considering the financial imbalance between parties and the undue stress caused by his previous actions. If he demonstrates consistent, responsible behavior, the custody arrangement may be reviewed after the child's birth." Olivia inhaled slowly, absorbing the decision. She had wanted to erase Ethan from her life entirely. But this wasn't just about her, it was about their child. A father's presence could be important if Ethan truly changed, and that was something only time would tell. The judge formalized her ruling in court, officially closing the Caldwell legal battle. Cameras flashed as Olivia stepped out of the courthouse, exhausted but steady, Sarah's supportive arm guiding her through the chaos. Ethan slipped out through a side entrance, avoiding the swarm of reporters shouting for comment. He no longer carried himself with the arrogance of a man untouchable by scandal. The world had seen him for what he was, and his fall from grace had been swift. Less than a week after the final ruling, Olivia felt the first sharp pangs of labor. It was late at night in the penthouse, where she still lived for convenience, while Ethan resided in a separate suite on another floor. She tried to remain calm as the contractions intensified, her breath coming in shaky waves. Rachel, who had been staying over to keep her company, rushed to her side. "Breathe, Liv. I'm calling Dr. Lund," she said, gripping Olivia's hand. The doctor advised them to head to the hospital immediately. Within minutes, Olivia was admitted to a private maternity suite, courtesy of the Caldwell insurance plan, but no luxury could soften the sharp waves of pain that came faster and harder. She clutched Rachel's hand, her forehead damp with sweat. In the midst of the chaos, Ethan arrived. Olivia's first instinct was anger. She hadn't called him. But, under the court's arrangement, he had the right to be present, if she allowed it. She stared at him, torn between fury and vulnerability. Another contraction hit, stealing her breath. Ethan took a cautious step forward. "Do you want me in the room, or should I wait outside?" His voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. Gone was the arrogance, the control. In its place was something else, concern, maybe even regret. For a moment, Olivia hesitated. She thought of how alone she felt, how everything had changed. She didn't trust him, but he was the father of her child. And despite the anger simmering beneath her skin, she found herself nodding. "Stay," she whispered. "But you follow my rules. No stress, no fights." Ethan exhaled, nodding earnestly. "I promise." Over the next 12 hours, Olivia labored through unbearable pain, driven by sheer determination. Ethan remained at her side, unbelievably gentle, offering water, pressing cool cloths to her forehead, whispering quiet encouragement. Rachel stood nearby, watching him carefully, ready to step in if needed. As the final stage of labor arrived, Olivia screamed through the contractions, gripping Ethan's hand. For a fleeting second, she considered letting go. But in that surreal moment, she held on tighter. With one last cry, the baby arrived. Dr. Lund cleared the infant's airway, and a delicate wail filled the room. For the first time in months, Olivia let herself break, sobbing as she reached for her daughter. Ethan exhaled a shaky breath, his eyes fixed on the newborn. And for the first time, he looked truly humbled. Life filled the room with the newborn's first cry. Olivia collapsed back onto the pillows, exhaustion and relief crashing over her in waves. Across from her, Ethan's face was streaked with tears, and for once, he didn't try to hide them. "It's a girl," Dr. Lund announced, carefully placing the tiny baby in Olivia's arms. The infant squirmed, eyes tightly shut, her mouth puckering in an uncertain cry. Olivia's heart swelled. For a moment, all the betrayal, heartbreak, and fear faded away, replaced by something pure, something more powerful than anything she had ever felt before: love. She gently whispered the name she had chosen: Evelyn Rose Caldwell. Ethan repeated it under his breath, his voice breaking. She allowed him a moment to cradle Evelyn, though she watched him warily. His hands trembled as he held their daughter, his tears dripping onto the soft blanket wrapped around her tiny body. "Hello, Evelyn," he whispered. "Daddy's here." The tenderness of the moment was almost too much to bear. Olivia's chest ached with conflicting emotions: love for her daughter, grief over the wreckage of her marriage, and a faint, fragile hope that maybe fatherhood could bring real change in Ethan. That night, Olivia cradled Evelyn while Ethan sat in the hospital chair, arms folded, as if afraid to approach unless invited. His devotion to the baby was undeniable, but trust between them was shattered. Still, in that quiet space, with their daughter between them, the past seemed momentarily distant. The world outside, the media, the judgment, the scandals, no longer mattered. Bringing Evelyn home marked the beginning of an entirely new chapter. The penthouse, once filled with tension, now echoed with soft coos and the occasional cries of a newborn. Olivia was caught in a whirlwind of exhaustion and wonder, adjusting to motherhood with sleepless nights and endless diaper changes. Rachel arranged for a part-time nurse, though Olivia insisted on handling most of the responsibilities herself. Under the court's visitation arrangement, Ethan arrived daily, moving through the penthouse like a cautious guest in what was once his home. He brought fresh flowers, plush toys, and late-night feeding offers, though Olivia rarely accepted. She appreciated the gestures, but the past still loomed between them. More than once, she caught him staring at Evelyn with glassy eyes, as if the weight of his mistakes had finally settled onto his shoulders. Victoria Hayes had seemingly vanished from Ethan's world. Word spread that Caldwell Media had quietly severed ties with her, citing budget cuts. The tabloids, once obsessed with their affair, now painted her as the disgraced mistress, speculating that she might sell her story. Ethan refused to acknowledge any mention of her, focusing entirely on Evelyn. Olivia took cautious relief in knowing that chapter was over, but scars remained, and some wounds ran too deep to heal easily. Seeking stability, Olivia asked her attorney, Sarah Duvall, to move forward with legal separation. She refused to live in limbo, uncertain if Ethan's regret could ever undo the damage he had caused. Sarah filed the necessary paperwork, citing irreconcilable differences and the emotional distress caused by Ethan's false accusations. One evening, as Olivia rocked Evelyn to sleep, Ethan appeared in the doorway. He cleared his throat hesitantly. "Olivia, can we talk?" She glanced at him, then back at Evelyn, whose tiny eyelids were fluttering shut. With a quiet nod, she placed her daughter in the crib and stepped into the living room, the glow of the city lights reflecting off the glass windows. Ethan exhaled heavily. "I saw the separation papers," he admitted, his voice laced with sadness. "I know you're done with me, but I had to say it again. I'm sorry. For everything." Olivia crossed her arms. "I don't doubt that you're sorry, Ethan. But I can't forget what you did. You humiliated me. You dragged me into court and tried to take my baby from me. No apology erases that." He lowered his gaze, shame flickering across his face. "I understand," he murmured. "But please, let me do right by Evelyn. I want to be the kind of father she can look up to." Olivia's throat tightened. She had dreamed of raising their daughter in a loving home, with two parents who adored her. Now the best they could do was co-parent. "Evelyn deserves that," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But it doesn't change what you did to us." She wiped away a tear before continuing. "Maybe over time we can find a way to be civil for her sake." Ethan swallowed hard, nodding. "I'll respect any boundary you set," he promised. "Just let me be there for her milestones. Let me prove to both of you that I'm not the man I was." For the first time, Olivia saw something she hadn't before. Not control, not arrogance, but vulnerability. Ethan Caldwell, once the ruthless millionaire husband, was just a man standing in front of her, stripped of power, clinging to the only thing he had left, fatherhood. She felt a flicker of compassion but quickly reminded herself of the cost of misplaced trust. "Time will tell," she whispered. "For now, just focus on Evelyn. That's all I ask." A year passed in a blur of sleepless nights, first steps, and cautious interactions. Evelyn, now a bright and curious toddler, became the center of Olivia's world. The media frenzy surrounding their court battle faded, replaced by speculation. Would the Caldwells reconcile, or would they forever remain apart? Despite lingering wounds, Olivia allowed Ethan to be part of their daughter's life. But as for her heart, that was another matter entirely. Ethan visited Evelyn regularly, always arriving on time with his arms full of toys. But unlike before, he never overstepped the boundaries Olivia had set. Over time, she noticed something shift. The controlling, arrogant man she once knew had softened. He no longer dismissed her concerns about parenting or expected instant forgiveness. Instead, he simply showed up, patient, steady, and remorseful. Meanwhile, Olivia found new purpose in philanthropy. She launched a program to help foster children transition into adulthood, drawing from her own experiences to guide them. No longer living under the constant weight of scandal, she thrived as an advocate, using her platform to make a real impact. Public sentiment turned in her favor. Once, she had been the center of a vicious scandal. Now she was celebrated for her resilience. Even the once skeptical board members of Caldwell Enterprises praised her influence, recognizing how she had brought integrity back to the family name. With time, she and Ethan found themselves sharing civil moments. A casual lunch in the park with Evelyn, a polite exchange about holiday plans. The wounds of betrayal still lingered, but Olivia could see that Ethan was trying, not with empty promises but through actions. Though they continued living separate lives, they slowly began collaborating on charity events and educational initiatives for children. When Evelyn's second birthday arrived, they stood together, navigating the occasion without bitterness. For the first time in years, their world felt peaceful. Their marriage had crumbled, but Evelyn had bound them together in ways no courtroom battle could break. Whether Olivia could ever open her heart to Ethan again remained uncertain. But for now, they stood side by side, not as husband and wife, but as parents, wiser and humbled by their journey. And so, the tumultuous story of Olivia and Ethan Caldwell came to a quiet resolution. A marriage undone by betrayal and suspicion, yet reshaped by redemption and the love for the child who had brought them back from the darkest days. Olivia's strength in exposing her millionaire husband's affair had not only preserved her dignity, but had forced Ethan to reevaluate what fatherhood and love truly meant. Their journey serves as a reminder that trust, once shattered, cannot be rebuilt with words alone. It is restored through actions, through consistency, humility, and the unwavering commitment to do better. If you were captivated by this real-life drama of twisted accusations, shocking revelations, and the unbreakable resilience of a woman scorned, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue bringing you powerful stories of heartbreak, hope, and hard-won redemption. Thank you for watching.